Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Those Astrology Girls podcast. I'm Keelie.
I'm Nicole.
And today we are talking about a really fun and special part of your chart. We are talking about the chart ruler. So, in past episodes, we have talked to you guys a lot about just how important the sun and the moon and the rising sign and how these three parts of you really do make up this recipe of you and who you are and how you express yourself out in the world. Well, when we think about, those three parts of ourself, there's one additional part of ourself that is very important kind of to stack on top of that. And that is the chart ruler. Okay, so before we get into what is the chart ruler, I just kind of want to paint a picture for you guys just so you can kind of see how this all fits together. So I'm a pizza girl. I love a good pizza. And when thinking about just okay, this recipe of you, let's put it to food, right? If you've got a pizza, you've got your crust, you've got your sauce, and you've got your cheese. Let's say that is those are the core ingredients that you need to have a basic cheese pizza are those three things, right? You don't have really a pizza without it. I mean, maybe, in some version, but that really does make up, okay, your sun, your moon, and your rising sign, this core recipe of you. Okay, well, we talk a lot about other planets too, like Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, all the way through Pluto, right? Those are very important as well, but they create these nuances and subtleties on top of this core recipe of who it is that you are. So in this pizza analogy that we've got going on here, think about, all those other planets as being these additional toppings that you get to sprinkle on top of your own personal pizza. And you really are making this really unique and special. The flavor of this pizza is so unique and special to you based on all of your individual planets that you have and what they are. Okay, so there's one aspect of this though that we haven't really talked about, and that is who's the person behind the scenes even making the pizza and put it together, right? We talk about the actual food itself, but who's the chef, the leader behind the scenes, driving this recipe creation process? All right, so that's who we're talking about today specifically is the chef of your own kitchen, the heart of your chart, the queen of your kingdom, right? Who is this person? Who is this kind of driving force who's really taking this recipe of you and bringing it out into the world? Otherwise, it's just a pizza sitting on a hot plate on the top of your stove. But who's the one serving it? Who's the one that's creating it? Who's the one that's delivering it out into the world? That is your chart ruler, you guys.
Yeah, I love this analogy because it's so funny. People say compliments to the chef, and it's you can have pizza a million different ways, right? Depending on the toppings and how they are, but also flatbread, what is it? Deep dish pizza, thin crust pizza, so it's it really does depend on the chef. And so the chart ruler can show you so much about your own chart, about other people. Whenever I get someone's chart in my hand, I'm yes, of course I'm looking for their big three. I'm looking at everything, but I'm who's ruling their chart? Because that's going to tell me if two people are born in the same day, same year, which I recently just met people born 12 hours apart, not twins, but they had completely different chart rulers. And you know what? Their charts were completely different. And the way that they was completely different, even though 99% of their planets were the same. So it can really give you at that different view of people. And I just think it's a fun, quick way to get to know yourself even more and to get to know other people really quickly.
Yeah. When we think about, your chart ruler is going to be this really special planet in your chart. And we all know the sun is so important. The sun makes up 70% of who you are energetically, but we're talking about more than just how you're out in the world expressing yourself. We're really talking about the energy that's driving that who that's showing up in the world. Okay. So it's kind of if you think about it, I like to think about all of the planets, each planet is an aspect of you. And that aspect of you is going to show up in the world in a different way, depending on, who you're with, where you're at, what you're doing. A different version of you might turn online. Just my moon might turn online when I'm at home. My sun might turn online when I'm really immersed in being out in the world, pursuing my purpose. My Mars might really turn online when I'm really needing drive and passion and energy to really maybe I'm in a workout. Okay. Maybe that's my Mars showing up, or maybe I'm in relationship with my partner, and my Venus, my planet of love, that loving aspect of me is really going to show up. So we have all of these aspects of ourselves that are going to show up depending on where we're at, who we're with, what we're doing type of thing. But there's one of those planets, one of those aspects of you that is showing up all the time. That's really this like driving energy when you go out into the world. Who's leading? And if you think about it too, which will again, this is kind of like tying it back to how we get to the chart ruler, which we'll get into a little bit more of like those details, but it really is connected to your rising sign. So if you think about like your rising sign really is the way that you're showing up in the world. It's kind of like that like first impression. It's kind of the same thing with your chart ruler, except this is more like, you know, the rising sign really is like the expression of like the how it's showing up. And the chart ruler is really like, okay, what's the hat that you're wearing? Okay, like who is the aspect of you that's showing up? Is it the lover? Is it the emotional part of you? Is it the intuitive part of you, or the thinker and the communicator, or this like really, you know, person who's deep in their self-expression? Like who is the version of you, the hat that you are wearing when you walk out of the door and for most of the day that's really driving you in your day-to-day actions? That is your chart ruler, which is why it's really cool to have the awareness of understanding. It's almost like taking your knowledge of your rising sign to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking like as we're talking about this, that show, I don't know what it's called, but it's like where the basket, like they get a basket of things and it's like completely wild ingredients. Like maybe like 6 of the ingredients go together and you're like, oh, that's perfect. Like that would make a cheeseburger. And then there's like 2 completely like do not make sense ingredients. And it's all up to that chef who's creating the meal or creating the thing that will make that come to life. And so sometimes our astrology charts can be like that. Like they can be like, all of this just makes so much sense. Then you have like a wild card planet and you're like, oh gosh, like how does this fit in with things?
Yes.
Like kind of like my Venus in Capricorn with everything else going on in my chart. It's just kind of like, whoa, different. Okay, it doesn't show up the same as everything else. And so the chef, a chart ruler, is going to filter that out and make sure that it makes sense with the way that I'm showing up in the world, the way that I'm presenting, the hat I'm wearing, and, you know, just figures it out for me. And that is an additional lens we can look through. And that just made me think of that show, because those people, sometimes they open those baskets and they're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with like this thing? And that's literally astrology for you in a nutshell. It's like, how do I work with this thing that I likely selected for myself, but like, you know, and your chart ruler's here like, I'm here to save the day. Like, I will help you make sense of this and show up and just do an amazing job at expressing yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, I love that show. I can't remember what it's called, but like, yeah, it so is true. It's like, you know, however you're going to use those ingredients in your meal, these like random ingredients, like that is going to be so, you know, unique to that specific chef. And even thinking too, you know, again, like your chart ruler is very much tied to your rising sign. You know, who you're like seeing on the surface. Like when I'm looking at myself, it's like, okay, like there's Virgo here, like Virgo appearance, Virgo skill sets are here. But the person who is like, you know, the hat that I'm wearing, that like when you're communicating with me, is you're getting my Mercury. All right. You're getting the intellect, the communicator, the analyzer, because that's what's tied to my Virgo rising. And that's what rules my Virgo rising is Mercury. So my Mercury is what is taking me throughout the world. And even thinking about it before this, I'm just like deepening into just my own Mercury chart ruler. And I'm like, I mean, at what point in the day am I not like crazy about learning something or analyzing something or just, you know, communicating what I'm learning or sharing with others about just different things that I'm learning? Like my whole world revolves around learning. And I'm like, I will be a lifelong learner to like the very end. But that is what Mercury is. Mercury is the thinker, the communicator, the learner, you know, the sharer of information out into the world. And Nicole, yours is what? Pluto? So
Yeah.
how do you see, like when you're thinking about your own chart ruler too, like what kind of comes up for you and how do you really like feel into your chart ruler?
Oh, I'm always asking questions. Like, I want to learn more about people, about things, about processes. I'm like, I want to understand this in a deeper way. I want to understand why it makes so much sense. I want to see where maybe this could fall off track. Like, I just like want to know pitfalls. I want to know opportunities for success. Like, I'm looking for where things could either literally burn down or rise from the ashes all the time, and it's just so natural. So like when a friend comes to me and asks me something, I literally will almost always like hit them with a question back. Like, I need to know more about this. Like, I can't just get the surface level details and be like ready to respond. I'm like, no, tell me more. Send me a voice memo. Give me all the aspects. Send me their birth chart. Like, I want to know the deeper parts of things, and that's how I interact with everything. Like, nothing to me is enough. Like, I need to know more so that I can really deepen my own understanding and then advise accordingly and see like what transformation's possible here.
Yes.
And I found that like in the corporate world, this can be really hard because people usually don't know. They don't know how far something could go. And it's like, but I find myself really liking to connect with people on a deeper level. Like, tell me more about your vacation. Tell me more about the thing that you did last week that was really impactful to you and how you felt about it. That to me is so much more important than like what time you need this thing done by. You know what I mean? Like, we'll get to that part, but I want to go deep. And it's funny because I can imagine the Mercury, like, analytical side. It's like, okay, then we got this, and this, and very orderly and figured out. And then, then you might go into something deeper. Whereas I'm like, oh my gosh, no, take me deeply, tell me more. And then we can figure out the like high level details,
Yeah, Pluto, this planet of transformation. I think it's really cool, like how connected you are in your day to day and just how this like energy of transformation and like how you can get to the bottom of things and really kind of like, I don't know, just like bring things to the surface too in this really investigative way. It's like you are transforming from like the inside out, whatever it is you touch or whatever it is you do or whoever it is you talk to. It's like that transformation that you're always seeking and probably that shows up in your conversations all the time, which is really interesting.
Yeah, my husband will be like, oh, he'll just tell me something like flat surface value, like whatever. And I'm
You're
like,
no.
How do you think she feels about that? Like, what? He's like, what are you talking about?
It's like, that's so deep.
Yeah. Like, usually I'm like trying to like figure things out. He's like, what? Like, I didn't, like, it kills me when he tells me like random stuff. And I'm like, what about this? What about this? What about this? He's like, well, I didn't ask any of those questions. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have so many questions for things, and I think that can be like annoying, but I was probably that kid like, why in the back seat, to my mom. But knowing that I picked that Scorpio rising for that planet to be there, and you same with Virgo rising and Mercury, we're going to hear all about like these rising signs, why it makes sense. And think about, okay, well, how do I find my chart ruler? Well, we're going to look at the rising sign. And, it's so specific to you because the rising sign changes every few hours, every single day, based on where the sun is on the eastern horizon when you were born. So this is important stuff to know. And if you know your rising sign, then you're going to be able to find your chart ruler. So grab your chart now, figure it out, and just take a look and like, okay, what is the archetypal energy associated with my rising sign? And then we're going to find that planet in your chart and where it is, because it may not be in the same house as your rising sign. So it could be anywhere in your chart. So don't panic if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a Gemini rising and Mercury's like somewhere else in my chart. Perfect. We're going to talk about why that makes sense. And so chart ruler is really helping us understand how you're moving along this path to your purpose. And, if we look at like the other planets, we've talked about in episode 1, sun, moon, rising, right? The big 3, and how that is really the recipe of you. But the sun is your core essence, the moon is your inner world, and your rising is that outer shell and appearance. But your chart ruler, the guiding light, the chef, if you will, is going to give us that deeper piece. So look for your chart ruler, and you're going to look for any planets that it is near in your chart, because that's going to add a different flavor to it. Like, that's going to be the chef who like really cares about uniforms, or the chef who's like all about like a really great, happy and vibrant kitchen atmosphere, or it could be the lone chef who's like, I'm just going to do this by myself. I'm going to do everything on my own. The planets that are near that planet can also influence everything for you. So for me, my chart ruler is conjunct or touching many other planets in my chart. And so it just adds this extra oomph, if you will, to that Plutonian energy. But then you're going to look at like, what sign is it in? So obviously the 12 signs episodes, you can go back and tune into that if you want to deepen into that sign a little bit more. And then what house is it in? Because the house is going to be where in your life this is showing up. Your chart ruler has that lens of the planet, the sign, and the house. So all are important, and you can listen to all of our episodes where we talk about these things if you want to recall like anything else, but we're going to give you a different flavor of your chef chart ruler personality today.
Yeah. And so, really quick, too, we want to just, but what we're going to do next is we're going to run through each of the signs and tell you specifically what their planetary ruler is. That way you can understand, what is the planet that is driving you. And yes, we're talking about it like in the kitchen and like as a chef, but as we go through each sign as well, we're going to be sharing, some tangible examples of like, okay, this chef, how would like you as a chef show up in the kitchen? But I want you to really, as we're going through each one, I want you to really think about that and apply it to your life in whatever way makes sense. Like, how does, for example, I do coaching work. So how does this chef in the kitchen also apply to the way that I create as a coach? Ultimately, like chefs are in the kitchen, creating. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are creators in some capacity. We're all creative in our own way. We're all making something or doing something or pursuing something out in the world. And it's like, okay, in what energy, in what way, and what hat are we wearing specifically as we go out into the world and like live our purpose? Me as a coach, what is like the hat that I'm wearing when I'm working with my clients? Well, again, kind of like what we talked about, I'm like the analyzer hat, the communicator hat, the thinker hat, the learner hat. Like, who am I behind the scenes when I'm not coaching? Like learning, thinking, analyzing charts, right? Like, of course I'm a freaking Virgo. And then same thing with Nicole. Like, yes, like, we're going to talk about, like, for example, Pluto as a chef in the kitchen, which is going to be cool because we can kind of really relate to these things and think about things in a different way. But then it's like, okay, Nicole really applying that to her life. It's so funny too. Actually, I just have to say, like, thinking about Virgo in the kitchen and like Mercury in the kitchen, I'm like, that is so me. Like, has to follow like the exact recipe. Like, what is the perfect amount of like the thing that I got to put into my recipe? It's like so funny. But anyways, I think maybe you might even find some parallels with how you are in the kitchen. We will see. So that being said, really quickly, I want to run through each of the signs and specifically what their ruler is.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have Aries rising, you are ruled by Mars. Your ruling planet is Mars. And so if you are a Taurus rising, you are ruled by Venus. If you're a Gemini rising, you're ruled by Mercury. If you are a Cancer rising, you're ruled by the moon. If you are a Leo rising, you are ruled by the sun. Virgo rising comes back to Mercury. So some of these planets have two, you'll notice that. And then we move to Libra rising, ruled by Venus, and Scorpio rising, ruled by Pluto, Sagittarius rising, ruled by Jupiter, Capricorn rising, ruled by Saturn, Aquarius rising, ruled by Uranus, and Pisces rising, ruled by Neptune. So when we talk about these rulers, these are all modern day rulership. Back in the day, they didn't have telescopes that could see Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, so they kind of were just going with rulership in a way that they associated the planets to go. So like traditionally, Scorpio was ruled by Mars, and different things like that. So we're talking about modern rulership. Now, those astrology girls, you're probably just concerned with modern rulership. We're not too worried about it, but just know back in the day, they did have some little adjustments there so that they could work with the planets that they knew well. But we're so lucky to be in a time where we have these additional 3 evolutionary planets to work with. Could you imagine actually if they were like, by the way, there's 6 other planets like impacting us? We would, as astrologers, I think we would lose our minds. Like, tell us more, but also like, oh my gosh, right? That would be crazy. So that's probably how they felt back when they were using their traditional rulers. Like, what do you mean Neptune? What do you want me to do with this? So, we're lucky to have this info, but don't worry if you've heard traditional versus modern rulership, or if you're a Scorpio rising, you've heard you've been ruled by Mars. It's not wrong. It's just modern. We look at Pluto because that has a different archetypal energy that works more with what we know about Scorpio, what we know about the planets and how they interact.
And we just invite you to like explore this with yourself, like really just kind of feel into these rulers and play with both of them. Like if you're someone who has both a modern and a traditional ruler, maybe just like feel into each of them and like how they feel for you, but maybe give more emphasis to, your modern ruler. If you're brand new to rulership and you're like, what is all this modern and traditional talk? Don't worry about it. Just know that there might be another planet that you want to just play with and explore around. Again, this is like your journey. We're just here to support you through it and invite you to just lean into what feels good and intuit what feels good to you.
So if you're thinking about what are the traditional rulers, if you're curious, the only 3 that it really impacts are Scorpio, Aquarius, and Pisces. So Scorpio was traditionally ruled by Mars, as I said. Aquarius was traditionally ruled by Saturn, and Pisces was traditionally ruled by Jupiter. So, play with both of those, like Keelie said, and see what calls to you. But just know those 3 signs get a little special extra flair.
So we're going to be now going into the specifics of each of the chart rulers. And so this is really your opportunity. Again, make sure you go look up what is your chart ruler. And now we're just going to kind of talk about, okay, how does that aspect of you, that hat that you wear when you walk out your door every day and that's like dominantly kind of leading your life, how is that part of you showing up, and what would that part of you look like if it was a chef in the kitchen? Okay, we're really taking this whole recipe of you thing, this pizza analogy, to the next level. So kicking off with a Leo rising. If you are someone that has a Leo rising, then the sun is the aspect of you that is going to be leading you through your day-to-day. As a reminder, the sun represents your core self, your core identity, your vitality, your life's purpose, that core essence of you. And with the sun as your chart ruler, this is really, you're someone who's really showing up with this authenticity, this expressive energy, this confidence. You're really exuding this like courage and this confidence in the way that you carry yourself throughout your day. And you really have this strong sense of self. So if you think about as a chef in the kitchen, someone with this like sun as the chart ruler, you're really confident in what you're doing, and what you're creating in the kitchen really is this strong expression of yourself. I mean, you are really embodying just that like strong sense of self. You've got this energy that's really contagious. People just are kind of like really drawn to this sun energy that you're embodying in the kitchen. And you really just are in this leader energy, thinking about the sun shining up in the sky out in the world, like you really are this bright shining light as a chef. And so really thinking too, like however that applies to you out in your, day-to-day in the work that you're doing, like that is who you are. So if you are someone that has a Cancer rising, the moon is going to be the aspect of you that is leading you through your day-to-day. So the moon, as a reminder, represents emotions, intuition, nurturing energy. It's how you feel safe out in the world, and, really places an emphasis on, your inner security and what it is that you need. That's really the moon's energy. Now with the moon as your chart ruler, you're someone who's really showing up with this emotion, with this caring and nurturing energy, with this like strong intuition, and really connected to your feeling body. You have this like nurturing power about you, and you're all about connecting with your loved ones. So if you think about someone, moon as a chart ruler, chef in the kitchen, like what does this look like? I really see this as someone who's like cooking those like home cooked meals. Like you cook everything with love for your family, for your loved ones. Like you really do show up in the kitchen with this like nurturing, loving energy, cooking those home cooked meals that everyone just like takes a bite and they're like, this is it. Like I feel home here. Like you cook with so much love as this moon chart ruling chef. And it's this energy where like you're always making people feel like safe in your home, safe in your kitchen, just very loving, connected energy. Okay, so if you were someone that has a Gemini or a Virgo rising, then Mercury is going to be this aspect of you that is leading you through your day. So Mercury represents communication, learning, curiosity. And with Mercury as your chart ruler, you're going to show up very communicative, ready to think, ready to learn, ready to share everything that you're learning out into the world. And inside of the kitchen, I'm going to give you two like a little bit of different scenarios here based on if you're a Gemini or a Virgo rising. So as a Gemini rising, I would say, you're someone in the kitchen who really loves to learn about all the new recipes. Maybe you're like Pinteresting a bunch of things and you're like gathering a bunch of different recipes that look really fun, and you're just really excited to explore in the kitchen and try out new recipes. Your approach in the kitchen is really fun and really playful as a chef. Maybe you're like chatting with friends and you're just enjoying a nice drink while you're, cooking, and you're making friends with everyone else that's in the kitchen around you, and just kind of gathering all your friends and just kind of talking and chatting and having a lot of fun while you're doing it. And maybe you're also too someone who's really just like thinking up new ways to create like new versions of the same recipe. It's like a very creative energy. It's like, okay, what can I create with like all of these ingredients? Let me just like throw them in and like see what I can come up with. Now, as a Virgo rising, a little bit of the same energy, but different, because your energy is really directed as like, okay, you love to research recipes, get into like the nitty gritty of like the ingredients, and you're really creating to probably perfection. Okay, you're always striving to be better in the kitchen than you were the day before. You love following the exact details of the recipe. I can say that that is me. Like, I cannot go off script with a recipe. It is like, if I don't have the recipe and the exact ingredients, like, I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm just like, show me. You're also someone who may be very like organized in the kitchen. You like to just kind of have your stuff there. You like to be clean. If it's just like chaos and a mess, like, it might just like drive you crazy. I can relate to that. And maybe you just like know where all your ingredients are. Like, you've got your system down. Like, this is where this is. This is where this is. This is where this is. Like, nobody move my stuff. Like, I know where everything is. This is how we're gonna go. And it's just like a very organized process in the kitchen. So that's kind of, a little bit of the difference between maybe if you got like a Gemini Mercury versus like a Virgo Mercury chart.
Yeah, now we think about, okay, Taurus and Libra risings. Venus is the aspect of you that's leading you throughout the day. Venus is representing love, beauty, value, relationships. And so you're going to show up with that in the kitchen as your chef persona here, as your chart ruler. And so you're going to show up with love, beauty, and pleasure. But just like Keelie described with Mercury and Gemini and Virgo, they're going to show up differently if you are a Taurus rising or a Libra rising. And so a Taurus rising is like, oh my gosh, all about the five senses. You taste while you cook. You love the journey. You're creating this masterpiece. This is like a whole thing for you. And it's not just about the food, but the whole experience. Like, I could see the Taurus rising, like caring about the plate, caring about how it looks on the plate. What is the whole experience going to be? Is there music on? Are you going to sit together? Do you have linen napkins? Like, what is the vibe here? And this is like the wine paired with the cheese and the chocolate, and it's like a whole 5-course meal. Like, everything is important. I could rarely see like a Taurus rising ruled by Venus putting like something basic on a plate and being like, here's my meal. Like, it would just probably be like out of desperation for them. They'd be like, okay, I need to eat, but like, I'm gonna come back to this later and make it really, really nice. And then, a Libra rising is going to show up very similarly, have a lot of these same aspects. But I think with a Libra rising, you're going to have a lot of like balanced meals. If you think about like a balanced flavor profile, they're going to come and like take everything into consideration. Like, do I have enough this? Do I have enough salt? Do I have enough acid? Do I have enough heat? Like, they're coming together for this like perfect recipe. But it's more in like, how does that come off on the palate? Like, how are people perceiving and receiving this? And also too, like, they could be really interested in having a chef like co-creating with them in the kitchen and building relationships and camaraderie and like working together. And they're creating this like beautiful masterpiece, just like Taurus. But what I've seen with my own Libra risings in the kitchen is that they might want to be left alone to create this beautiful masterpiece to share with others, to feed them, to be like this loving, caring, here's the meal I made for you, like, this is everything, and just feel really good about that. I laugh with my husband, he's a Libra rising, and he's like, please don't get in my way in the kitchen. And I'm like, I want to be your sous chef, like, I'm going to do stuff. And so just sometimes Libras could want their own lane in that way.
Well, they are an initiating sign too, so they're like, or that cardinal energy. So they're like, I'm going to do what I'm doing. I'm here to create my work of art, which is this like food and this meal. But at the same time, I want you here to like chat with me and keep me company, but like, don't get in my way.
Exactly. And
don't interfere.
I have a really great way of getting in the way in the kitchen. Yeah. Just opening doors and like, whoops, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm like a tornado of my own. So it's kind of funny. And you would think then that would make me an Aries rising, because Mars is the ruler that's leading you through the day here, but I'm not. Traditionally I am. But, Mars represents action, drive, passion, and its placement shows where you put that energy and how you're taking initiative. And so with Mars as a chart ruler, you're going to show up with a lot of energy and passion, courage. You can tackle anything different that comes your way. Like, I imagine those people who cook for like banquets. Like, they cook like for a lot of people. Like, they're like, I got this, don't worry. Or they've got that Virgo rising with like, I've got exact amount of ingredients and everything's going to go well. But, when you think about an Aries rising in the kitchen, they're daredevil. They're always up for a challenge. They're creating a brand new recipe no one's ever done before. Definitely like those people on the competitive chef shows who are like showing up, they've got like, suddenly there's flames coming out and like everything works out and they're like, yes, I did this, like, and they come in first place. I was also thinking of this scene from Schitt's Creek where David and Moira were making the cheese, or like the mac and cheese.
Oh my god, that is so funny. I've seen that.
Yeah, and
you just fold in the cheese.
Fold in the cheese, and David's like,
how do
you fold in the cheese? Yeah. So okay, David's definitely like the Virgo rising in this situation, and Moira's the Aries. She's like, just fold it in, David. I don't know what.
Just
what do you mean?
it.
Just do it. Yeah. And so if you think about that, like those two people trying to cook together, or like those two rising sign chart rulers showing up in the world together, it can cause a little bit of confusion, a little bit of conflict, a little bit of friction there. And so that makes me laugh about this. But then we go to Sagittarius rising, so ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter's going to show up and represent your expansion, luck, wisdom, as placement shows where growth and opportunities come to you. So with Jupiter as your chart ruler, and you're going to show up with like this really great enthusiasm and optimism, like go big or go home energy. When I think of this, I think of like kids in the kitchen. They're like, I want to crack the egg. I want to do the thing. Like, let me try it. Let me do it. Let me touch it, you know? And like, they might make a mess, but they're having the time of their lives, you know? This is like, also to Jupiter energy feels like, you know, creating this extravagant, going above and beyond like what people are traditionally going to do. Have you ever seen those people like, I guess like when you're at a fancy restaurant and they have like that like sauce or whatever and they put it on the plate in like the perfect swath, like it's like, oh, it's perfect, right? Like that's kind of like that extra step. Like we're not just putting parsley on the edge here, like we're going with like more decadent looking things when you've got that Jupiter in your chart, you know, as your chart ruler. And you know, you have that lucky touch, so it's like that's the person who's just like, oh yeah, I just like dreamt up this idea and like bam, here it is. And everyone's like, this is so good. What's your recipe? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just kind of did it. You know, it feels very lucky and happy and expansive. But bringing the optimism and the enthusiasm, like this is not the person who serves you something is like biting their nails going, God, I hope you like it. They're like, it's going to be amazing. You know, like that's just that energy they bring. And so there's no recipe too big for a Jupiter rising.
I love that. And I was thinking too with the Taurus, because it's like Taurus also is about simplicity. Almost like it's about creating this like beautiful, like decadent, that word is like coming to me, like, I don't know, but like something like really like elegant, but it's like so simple. It almost reminds me, actually, this is what it reminds me of. My husband and I went to a really nice sushi restaurant. It was like a whole experience in and of itself, but it was like a 16-course meal, but like every meal was just one piece of sushi. Right? And like there's no soy sauce. Like you can't, I mean, it's like that good, right? You don't dip it in anything. You can't run it. Like it's not that kind of place. And it's like one little piece that's like sitting on a little bed of rice and you just like taste it. Just like the simplest bite, a one bite thing. And you just sit there and you enjoy it and you take it in. And that's just like what I kind of think of with Taurus. It's like, it doesn't have to be this like huge thing either, but it's like so delicate and so simple and so elegant, like, you know, all at the same time. Like there's beauty and simplicity. And that's what I think about with almost like a Taurus chef too.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Because when you go to those things, you're like, what is this? Like, what am I going to, and then you're like, oh my gosh, wow, that was like really amazing, you know, if you're used to more complex meals. But it's funny, like in a human design aspect, like there's all these different ways like that you can really enjoy food and how you absorb information and all this stuff. And it's like, for me, I'm really simple. Like I could eat the same thing over and over again. I like it to be really simple, but like there's the peripherals that are important, you know, to like everything else. And so it's funny when you think about that, like how people enjoy things. And I wonder how that like chart ruler comes into it and has like an impact on how we experience literally everything beyond food, because everyone has to eat, right? But then like use these examples as you think about how are you showing up in the world? How are you, you know, showing up to others? Like, how do you start your car? Like, I just like imagine like you could, you know, have this chaotic, like coming into the car with like 15 things in your hands. Like, that's fine. Like, whatever, that's who you are. You just throw everything in the seat and you start the car and you pull right out. Other people are like, I'm going to check my mirrors. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And get the radio station, the podcast going. And then I'm going to back out slowly and I'm going to head on my way. Like, it really applies to everything.
Yeah. And I'm even thinking too with Jupiter, which you kind of mentioned this, but it's almost like too, I could see the Jupiter stuff. It's like all about the celebration, right? Like that go big or go home energy is almost like, let me like cook this really, it's like the cakes at like weddings. It's like, here, I'm going to give you this like badass, huge wedding cake for your wedding. And it is going to be like extravagant and the best thing. And it's going to be the center of like the whole wedding. I don't know, what's the word, reception, you know, thing, but like, I could see that being total Jupiter energy too. It's just like, you're all about like the celebrations, like really creating these really big creations and projects that just like blow everyone away. They just get to like all over and like soak up and just everyone gets to enjoy together in this like big celebration.
You know what it also reminds me of too? Like, you know, okay, back in the day, I've never really done this, but like, when you order a bottle at a club, it would just appear. You'd have a bottle of champagne or something like that. It was like a thing, and it's very expensive, and it shows up. Now bottle service comes with like a whole team and like a sign and like a dance. That's like very.
We would know because we're at the club every weekend, right?
Yeah, I've just seen this on Instagram.
Same. We don't want you guys. We have no life.
We would never spend that much money on a bottle of alcohol, probably with like, a whole team, but like very big Jupiter energy. Like that's kind of like the whole experience. And I imagine the person said, let's make everyone feel special when they order this bottle was like very like Jupiter chart ruler, because they know that experience just adds to the whole thing.
Totally. I love that. Okay, so moving on to Capricorn rising. So with a Capricorn rising, Saturn is going to be your chart ruler, and Saturn is going to be this aspect of you that is going to be showing up, leading you through your day-to-day. It represents discipline, structure, lessons. It's about responsibility and always working towards those long-term goals to attain long-term success, sustainable success. So with Saturn as your chart ruler, you're someone who's showing up very responsible, very committed to whatever you're working on. You're really serious about your goals and really always working towards self-mastery. That's huge for a Saturn chart ruler. Now in the kitchen, you're a chef with really big goals. I always see this as kind of like the chef. I don't know if you guys have watched like Emily in Paris, but I'm like all about like the Michelin star, because that's what the guy in Emily in Paris is like always working towards. And I see that as like, okay, this like Saturn chart ruler person like has the big goals, has the big dreams, and it's working towards that. And you are committed to getting that like Michelin star. It's the best of the best, and you've attained mastery in whatever it is that you are creating and working on. I also see that you being someone who perhaps like takes your work really seriously in the kitchen. It's like, okay, like this is like my life's work here in the kitchen. Like I take this so seriously, and I'm here to really master whatever it is that you are creating or doing. And same with like outside of work. It's like you have really big goals, and like you're here to achieve those goals, and you have the discipline and the commitment to be able to get there. And like that's really core to you. Like if you have a Saturn chart ruler, you probably feel that really deeply, that like you're someone who is here to do something in this world and like work towards something. And so it's like, okay, I've got the discipline and that energy of commitment and being responsible with how I'm using my energy and my time and my day to day is like this guiding force to kind of help you get to whatever goal it is that you've set for yourself. Now, if you're someone with an Aquarius rising, then Uranus is going to be the aspect of you that's really guiding you. That's going to be your chart ruler. As a reminder, Uranus represents, rebellious energy, innovation, sudden and shocking changes. And so with Uranus as your chart ruler, you're going to be showing up in a really, that like rebellious, innovative, unique way out in the world. This unique way that really like shatters any standard of who society tells you you're here to be in the world. Uranus as your chart ruler is like, no, I'm not going to fit in. I'm not going to like fit inside some box of, however somebody's telling me to be. Like you really approach this world in a really unique way and in this very individual way. You're someone who really like dances to the beat of your own drum, and you really let yourself stand apart from the crowd. And so if you think about this energy being in the kitchen as this chef, like you are all about innovating in the kitchen. Like you are not creating the same old PB&J or pizza that like everyone else is. You were like, no, what I'm here to create is different. It's innovative. It's futuristic. It's food that nobody's even had before, but like you have this future vision for it, and you know how to really bring that to life. You're such a visionary in the kitchen. So you have these like big visions about what it is you want to create, and then you really like hone in and bring that to life. You also are someone who probably has like a very eclectic kind of taste. So you're that like restaurant or that chef that's like always kind of bringing in like different tastes of things, and people are just coming in for the experience. And like you have that to offer, which is really cool. Your recipes really reflect that like eclectic taste and that like uniqueness. Also, I just want to say no recipe is too weird for the Aquarius rising, okay? You are all about the weirdness, and you will try whatever it is, no matter how weird, and you're all about it.
Or just like no recipe in general.
Okay, yes. Yes. That's true. The Uranus person's like, yeah, nothing. Don't tell me how to make this recipe. Like I will make it my own way.
That's like one time, which I'm not an Aquarius rising, I just wasn't really listening, and I put chocolate chips into the dry ingredients of cookies, and I just know that's, you don't do that because you're mixing it. It's a mess. I was like, what was I doing? But I feel like an Aquarius rising would make that work, Mm-hmm. And then hearing you describe the Saturn, the Saturn and the Uranus chart ruler, it made me think of this restaurant. It's very specific. It's called Noma, and it's in Copenhagen, and they go on the road like once or twice a year, but they also have a test kitchen, and they're known for really unique unique cuisine, but it's like this mastery of it. And so it's like, I think to myself, I'm like, maybe the people running that are like, they've got that Saturn chart ruler and that Uranus chart ruler to be like, this is sea kelp and like, you're going to love it. And then also like, it's like this perfect mastery of what their craft is. And they do so many cool things. And so you can think about how like people come together in business or do all these things and like, they're bringing these different flares, and we need that. We need that uniqueness. I mean, just look at Keelie and I. Like, we're going to talk about Pluto in a second, but you know, ruled by Mercury and Pluto, it's a different combo and it brings things in a different way. So looking at Pisces rising, so we're looking at Neptune being your chart ruler. And this is, you know, really all about dreams, intuition, spirituality, faith. It's highlighting where you're seeking that transcendence, that kind of like zoom out and like into the nothing, but like still meaningful nothing. You know, Neptune is your chart ruler. You're going to show up in a dreamy, a creative, and an intuitive and mystical way. It's a really special energy that you bring forward. But like in the kitchen, you're like, there are no boundaries here. It is what it is, or it isn't. You know, there's no limits. You're dreaming up recipes to bring them to life. You use your intuition to create things, combining ingredients that no one has ever done before, and creating like otherworldly experiences. Like, I imagine like every pregnant woman thinks that they're creating like otherworldly experiences of food, and you're like, no, actually that was terrible. But that's like, Pisces actually does create something beautiful with their meals, and you're like, I would have never put those things together. I'm trying to think, like, there's like some unique things. Like someone put this isn't that unique, but like someone said, oh, put a little bit of sugar on a cucumber and watch it taste like a watermelon. And I was like, who would have done that? Who would have came up with that idea? Probably someone with Neptune as their chart ruler, you know, because it can be really interesting. But this also can really come forward as like cooking for others, you know, feeding others in a way that's really selfless, and like, you know, sharing food with others as a means of connection and humanitarianism, and just making sure that there's a way for everyone to eat and to be seen and to be loved in that way. And now looking at Scorpio risings ruled by Pluto, you know, Pluto is all about transformation, power, deep change, and this shows where we are going under profound evolution in our lives forever. So with Pluto as your chart ruler, you're going to show up with intensity. You're bringing deep levels of profound transformation into everything you do, and this includes the kitchen. So when we talked about this a little bit before, we were laughing. We're like, Pluto is like a really powerful force in the kitchen, right? It really is. But I also think of this as like that grandma energy, right? Who's like listening to all of your troubles while also somehow cooking like this really helpful meal. And it's like, they call like one meal in like Italian cuisine, like Italian penicillin. And it's like a ton of garlic and, you know, carrots and celery and onion all together with like pasta. And it's very comforting, and it has like a bunch of, you know, antioxidants in it and all this stuff. But it's like, is it just the food? Or is it the person who cooked it with that transformative love? And so you can think like even the most simple of meals from like someone with a Pluto rising or Pluto chart ruler is going to heal in a different way or bring up something in you, like that emotion, that transformative power. But likely it's the yapping that happens in the kitchen that's actually probably more important than than the actual food itself. Me personally, when I'm cooking, like, I'm an okay cook. Like, I actually cook pretty well, but like, I'll be that person to put like the oil on to do something and then like be like deep in conversation, be like, whoops, oh my gosh, like, I'm about to start a fire, because I'm like, tell me more, you know, all these things. And so, you know, thinking about like Pluto rising chart rulership in the kitchen could also be like taking something that's like a dying dish, like something that people like don't eat anymore, and like bringing it back to life or changing it in a way and transforming it that people are suddenly like, whoa, this is amazing. And so no one knows how you do what you do in the kitchen, but it really makes an impact. You know, it's like, it's magic.
I kind of see it too, that like they're the person who has that secret ingredient that like they won't tell a soul. They're
Yes.
like, no, I'm not gonna tell you, not until I'm like on my deathbed dying, and then you'll get like the secret ingredient. But like, you know, they're the one who comes up with this, just like, you know, it's that secretive energy too, I think, which is, it's funny. I wonder how many people who have recipes with secret ingredients have that Pluto as a chart ruler.
Yeah, you never know. Like, we were talking about this before. My grandmom had a very secret piece to her recipe, and like literally to this day only like 3 people know it. And now Keelie is one of them, but I don't think she's going to do anything with it because it's really not that big of a deal. But it was like, I was like, I can't say it on the podcast. Like, my grandma will find me and she'll be like, oh my gosh. But you know, it's so interesting too to think about how people cook and like in the kitchen just in general. Like, when we went to write down my grandmother's recipes, like my one cousin did, and she's from Taiwan, and she wanted to learn how to cook like this Italian food like my grandmother. And my grandma was like, she was like, well, how much do you use? And my grandma was like, well, like about the size of my palm. And now my grandmother was 6 foot tall. She was a tall woman. She was big hands. And my cousin, who's from Taiwan, is like, well, that's not gonna, it's not the same. Like, how much is this? And so, you think about the, like, she definitely was not a Virgo rising when you think about that. But she has secret ingredients. It's kind of like, I wish that I could know the rising sign for, like, everyone old in my family.
Yeah. Well, another thing I want to say too is that, I'm thinking about, even as you were talking about, or I guess as I was talking about, Aquarius rising with like the Uranus ruler, there's so much of that energy too. Like, I think we can also look at who's the ruler of like some of our most important energies in our chart. Like, yes, I'm a Virgo rising. My chart ruler is Mercury, right? So that's, of course, my chart ruler who's driving me in my day to day. But every sign has a chart ruler. And so when you look at the really other prominent energies in your chart, like me for Aquarius, I have my Aquarius sun in there. Also, like my Mercury is in Aquarius too. So of course I'm really, Mercury is my chart ruler and it's also in the sign of Aquarius, right? So like Aquarius is going to be really prominent energy for me as well. And I also have my stellium in Aquarius. And so even listening to the planetary ruler of the sign of Aquarius, because again, every sign has a planetary ruler. We can also take that and like we might find some dominance in that as well, and like how that's also playing a role. Maybe that's like the co-chef in the kitchen, right? It's like any of the other really prominent planetary rulers in your chart. I'm even thinking about too, I have a Capricorn rising friend and she has a Gemini sun, and the way that she shows up in the kitchen, total Gemini, right? Like total Gemini energy in the kitchen. And also like I can see how that Capricorn rising and that, Saturn chart ruler also really shows up in the kitchen. So if you're kind of listening to this and you're like, well, it doesn't like fully resonate with like how I actually show up in the kitchen. Again, take what we're saying and like apply it to like what you're actually doing in the world, right? Because your chart ruler, it's not just like who you are in the kitchen. It's like who you are out in the rest of the world. But also feel free to play with some of the other planetary rulers just to kind of bring them in as your little like co-chefs and be like, oh yeah, like this person or this part of me, this aspect of me really does show up a lot here too in support of who my chart ruler is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point because thinking about where different chart rulers are in your chart, what planets are they near and like what house are they showing up in, it makes such a huge difference. Now for me, like it is what it is because I'm Scorpio rising. My chart ruler is in Scorpio in the first house. Like it's all right there. And so it's a very intense Pluto energy, right? Like there's no going around it. But thinking about my husband, so his chart ruler is Venus. His Venus is in Sagittarius. And so, when I think of that and you add a little bit of like a Jupiter flair to the way that he shows up and the way that he cooks and creates, and he actually is a really great cook and chef. It did take us years to get to this point though. Listen, ladies, if you're thinking, how do you get your husband to be like that? When he cooks really dry chicken, you just have to eat it. Like you have to be okay with it for a while until they figure it out. But, thinking about that and like that aspect of like adding in the Jupiter flair, even though, it's in Sagittarius, his Venus, I realize now, like when he puts food down on the table, like he expects people to like be like wowed. Like he's like, oh my God, like, wow, this is so good. And it's so funny because if he cooks for his whole family and they're like, oh yeah, it was just okay. Like the next time he cooks, like it will be so basic because he's like, well, whatever, nobody appreciated it. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so funny to see like the switch flip for him. He's like, well, whatever. Like nobody really cared about that fancy thing, so I'm just gonna make hamburgers.
I love that so much.
So yeah, it can really weigh out like how many different aspects you've got and things like that. And just like Keelie said, take what resonates, leave what doesn't. This was a very fun and specific example of, how your chart ruler can show up. But if you put on that different hat and that different outfit and that different uniform in so many different areas of your life, you will see these themes pop up more than you can ever imagine. And that's why chart rulership is probably, when we were listing all the podcasts we want to do, I was like, I really want to talk about chart rulership. I think it's a really cool and easy way to connect with someone. And it's kind of like your little, like when someone's like, oh, like so-and-so is like a Capricorn rising. I'm like, so where is their Saturn? Like, tell me more, like I want to know more about that. And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, send me the birth details because that helps me connect with the chart even deeper. But you can also look at house placements too, because that's going to give you a lot there. Like, what are your thoughts on house placements for working with the chart ruler?
Yeah. We talk about how like the house placement of your sun is like the most important house in your entire chart. Well, I would also add to that and say the house of your chart ruler is very, very important as well. Because if you think about it, like, again, you're walking out the door, like the aspect of you, the hat that you are wearing every single day for most of the day, unless you're dipping into a relationship here and want to show Venus here, or dipping into, just like your inner world and want to tap into your moon or your Neptune or whatever. Like for the most part, like your prominent dominant energy is going to be like that chart ruler energy. And so if you think about, okay, this chart energy, the way that it is carrying this recipe of me out into the world, driving this recipe out into the world, sharing it with others, well, where is it sharing it? Right? Like, where is it showing up the most? And what area of your life is your chart ruler driving you in? So beyond like the house of your sun, which again is like kind of like the house of that you are showing up with your life purpose. Well, what about your chart ruler? For me, like my sun and my chart ruler are in the same house. I'm like, okay, like there's a lot of emphasis here in my sixth house that I'm really here to show up. And it's just more information for you to deepen into this understanding of you and really reflect on, how and where does this energy show up for you? So yes, beyond the chart ruler, and honestly, this episode, just sit with your chart ruler if you're brand new to this stuff. And like, that aspect of you really being the chef in the kitchen, and really reflect on, how does this part of me really drive my day to day? How does it show up when I am showing up to work? How is it showing up when I'm walking out the door? And what are the different ways that this part of me likes to show up? It's not something that we have to like try to be. It just already is a way that we are. And so really reflecting on how this part of you already exists and how it's already like interacting with others or engaging out in the world. Because again, this is like bringing this part of you out into the world. So how is it doing that? Where is it doing that? You can deepen into it by looking at the sign in the house of the chart ruler as well.
Yeah, and I'd even add, very Plutonian of me, how does the chart ruler show up when you're feeling really good about yourself? And how does that chart ruler show up when you're talking smack on yourself too? Because it can really show us like the higher and lower octaves of that, how it's showing up in our own life, because we're the most critical to ourselves, and the chart ruler is going to be first on the scene for that. Like, reporting live, Nicole's not feeling great. Here we are, and you can see what's going to come up for you. It can really help you be like, oh, that's the lens I'm seeing everything through, and it can really help you deepen that even more.
You're saying that to a Virgo rising.
You're like, no,
self-criticism is off the charts.
You're like, I don't even need to try. Like, it's already there. I know what she says when she's live on the scene.
Yeah, that part of me shows up way more, and I'm like, shit, okay.
Yeah, so Keelie's challenge, and anyone who's super self-critical, is to look at how amazing your chart ruler shows up when you're feeling really good about yourself, when you're feeling super expansive, and be like, oh, wow, yeah, that's me, give yourself a little hug and a little pat on the back.
Hugs for the self.
Exactly. So now that we've kind of gone through all this, we want to encourage you to look back at the house and the aspects of your chart, like Keelie said, and you can go back to the episodes on the houses, the planets, the zodiac signs. All of these episodes stack on each other in so many different ways, and you can definitely look at Saturn and life lessons. If you're a Capricorn rising, that episode might be extra valuable for you to tune into, because it will give you just a different perspective to look at yourself through, because Saturn is ruling your life, and that's, I think, a gift in a way. We need that chart ruler sometimes to help us strengthen. When I meet a Capricorn rising, I'm like, oh yeah, I was like, you're in it. You're really like a strong person in this world, and I kind of want to be close to you because it feels really good. So overall, we hope you enjoyed today's episode. We hope you'll connect with your chart ruler. Definitely let us know on socials what you think of this episode. Let us know who your chart ruler is. Did it surprise you? Were you like totally on board? Now you're besties with your chart ruler. You can go ahead and rate and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us to get the word out there. And we do love connecting with you on social. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. So follow us.
Also Substack.
Oh yeah, and Substack. You can get emails whenever we publish a new podcast if you'd like over there. But, we just so thank you for your support and helping us bring Those Astrology Girls into the world and sharing it with your friends and your besties. It means the world to us. We'll be back again next Monday with a new episode, and we'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.